The morning shift at Rosie's Cafe started like any other Tuesday. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. Rachel wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day, her feet already aching even though it was barely past noon. She had been working at this small cafe for 3 years now, and she knew every regular customer by name, their usual orders memorized by heart. The lunch rush had just ended, and the cafe had settled into that peaceful afternoon lull. Only a handful of customers remained, scattered across the worn vinyl booths, nursing their coffee and picking at the last bits of their sandwiches. Rachel took a moment to catch her breath, leaning against the counter and watching the street outside through the large front windows. That's when she noticed him. An elderly man stood outside the cafe, peering through the glass at the menu board hanging above the counter. He wore a faded baseball cap with a military insignia she recognized but couldn't quite place. His jacket was thin despite the cool weather, and he seemed to be having some kind of internal debate with himself. For a full minute, he just stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his hand reaching for the door handle and then pulling back. Finally, he pushed the door open. The little bell above chimed, and Rachel looked up with her usual welcoming smile. The old man walked slowly, each step deliberate and careful, like someone whose knees had seen better days. Up close, she could see the deep lines etched into his face, the kind that came from decades of hard living and harder memories. His eyes, though tired, held a certain dignity that made Rachel stand up a little straighter. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get for you today?" Rachel asked warmly. The man cleared his throat and looked up at the menu board, his eyes scanning the prices. He pulled a worn leather wallet from his jacket pocket, the kind that looked like it had been carried through countless years, maybe even across oceans. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, and Rachel pretended not to notice, keeping her eyes politely on his face. "How much is the soup?" he asked, his voice rough but polite. "The soup of the day is $4.50, and that comes with crackers," Rachel replied. He nodded slowly, counting out bills and coins from his wallet. His fingers fumbled with the money, and Rachel could see him adding up the amounts in his head. He had a few crumpled dollar bills, some quarters, dimes, and pennies. After a long moment, he looked up at her, and she saw something in his expression that made her heart ache. It was embarrassment mixed with resignation, the look of a man who had been in this position too many times before. "Just the coffee, please," he said quietly, though she could tell from his face that coffee wasn't what he needed. He needed a real meal. "Are you sure? We have a great special today. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. It's really good, and there's plenty of it," Rachel offered, keeping her voice casual and friendly. The old man smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That sounds real nice, miss, but I'll stick with the coffee. Black is fine." Rachel rang up the coffee and watched as he carefully counted out the exact change, leaving nothing for himself. As she poured his coffee, she noticed the pin on his cap more clearly now. He was a veteran. She didn't know from which war or which branch of service, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that this man had served his country, and now he was counting pennies for a cup of coffee when he clearly needed a hot meal. She made a decision right then and there. "You know what, sir? We actually have a mix-up in the kitchen. Cook made an extra plate of the meatloaf special, and it's just going to go to waste if nobody eats it. Would you be doing us a favor and taking it?" Hate to see good food thrown out. The lie came easily because it felt right. The veteran looked at her, suspicion and hope warring on his face. "I couldn't do that, miss. You've got a business to run. Please, I insist, it's already made, and it'll just end up in the trash otherwise. You'd actually be helping us out." Rachel was already heading to the kitchen before he could protest further. She loaded up a plate with a generous portion of meatloaf, a heaping scoop of creamy mashed potatoes, green beans, and added 2 thick slices of bread on the side. She even grabbed a slice of apple pie from the display case. When she brought it out to him, his eyes widened. "Miss, this is too much." "I can't." "You can, and you will," Rachel said firmly but kindly, setting the plate down at a booth by the window. "Sit down and enjoy your meal, sir, and thank you." "Thank me? For what?" he asked, genuinely confused. "For your service," Rachel said simply. The old man's eyes glistened, and he blinked rapidly. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment, then carefully made his way to the booth. Rachel brought over his coffee and a glass of water, then left him to eat in peace. She watched from behind the counter as he ate slowly, savoring every bite like it was the best meal he'd had in weeks. And maybe it was. What Rachel didn't know was that someone else had been watching the entire interaction. Through the security camera in the back office, the owner's nephew had seen everything. Kevin had only been given management responsibilities a few weeks ago, and he was determined to prove he could run a tight ship. He had been reviewing the day's receipts and checking inventory when he happened to glance at the monitor. He watched Rachel give away food. He watched her lie about a kitchen mix-up. And he watched her do it all with a smile on her face, completely unaware that she was being observed. Kevin's jaw tightened as he rewound the footage and watched it again. This wasn't the first time he'd noticed food going missing or receipts not quite adding up. He'd suspected Rachel of being too soft, too generous with the cafe's resources. As the veteran finished his meal and stood up to leave, Rachel called out to him, "Come back anytime, you hear? You're always welcome here." The old man waved at her, his face showing more life than when he'd first walked in. "God bless you, young lady, you've got a good heart." Rachel waved back, feeling good about what she'd done. She had enough money in tips from the morning shift to cover the meal if it came to that, and besides, it was just the right thing to do. She had been raised to help people when you could, especially those who had sacrificed for others. She turned back to wiping down tables, humming softly to herself, completely unaware that her act of kindness was about to cost her everything. The office door behind her opened, and Kevin stepped out, his face set in hard lines, a printout of the security footage in his hand. The afternoon was about to take a very different turn. Rachel didn't hear Kevin approach. She was too focused on refilling the sugar dispensers at each table, her mind still on the grateful smile the veteran had given her before leaving. It wasn't until she heard his voice sharp and loud behind her that she realized something was wrong. "Rachel, we need to talk now." She turned around, surprised by his tone. Kevin stood there with his arms crossed, his face flushed red, holding what looked like a printed piece of paper. The few customers still in the cafe looked up from their meals, sensing the tension in the air. "Sure, Kevin. Is everything okay?" Rachel asked, keeping her voice calm even though her stomach had started to knot up. She'd never seen him look this angry before. "In front of everyone?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yeah, I think everyone here should hear this. Especially since they might be thinking they can get free food too." Rachel felt her face grow warm. "Kevin, maybe we should talk in the back." "No," he cut her off. "I want to address this right here, right now. Did you or did you not just give away a full meal to that man without charging him?" The cafe had gone completely silent. Even the soft music playing through the speakers seemed to fade into the background. Rachel was acutely aware of every eye on her. An older couple in the corner booth stopped eating. A businessman with his laptop looked up. A mother with two young children paused mid-conversation. "I did," Rachel said quietly but firmly. "He's a veteran, and he didn't have enough money for a proper meal. I was going to pay for it myself from my tips." Kevin let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, you were going to pay for it?" "That's interesting because I didn't see any money go into the register. What I saw was you lying to a customer about a kitchen mix-up and giving away cafe property without authorization." "It was just one meal," Rachel said, her voice starting to shake despite her efforts to stay calm. "The man served our country. He was hungry. I couldn't just—" "You couldn't just what?" "Do your job?" Kevin interrupted. "Your job is to sell food, not give it away. Do you know how many people would come in here every day if they knew all they had to do was look sad and tell you some sob story?" Rachel felt something inside her shift from embarrassment to anger. "It wasn't a sob story. He's a veteran who clearly needed help. There's a difference between being kind and being taken advantage of." Kevin waved the paper in his hand. "I have 3 years of security footage and receipts, Rachel. 3 years of little discrepancies. A sandwich here, a coffee there, an extra slice of pie that somehow didn't get rung up. You know what that adds up to? Theft." The word hung in the air like a slap. Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not cry in front of everyone. "Not over this. Theft?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always paid for anything I gave away. Check my tip jar. Check my records. I would never steal from Mrs. Henderson." Mrs. Henderson isn't here, is she? Kevin shot back. She left me in charge, and I'm telling you this behavior is unacceptable. You can't just decide who deserves free food and who doesn't. That's not your call to make. One of the customers, the businessman with the laptop, stood up. Excuse me, but I think you're being unnecessarily harsh. I've been coming here for 2 years, and I've seen this young lady treat everyone with nothing but respect and kindness. If she helped out a veteran, that seems like something to be proud of, not angry about. Kevin turned to him, his face even redder now. Sir, with all due respect, this is an employee matter and doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us, the older woman from the corner booth chimed in. We're sitting here watching you humiliate this girl in public for doing something decent. That says more about you than it does about her. Everyone needs to mind their own business, Kevin snapped, then turned back to Rachel. You have 2 choices here. You can apologize for your actions, promise it will never happen again, and accept a written warning in your file. Or you can leave. Right now. Rachel looked at him, really looked at him. She saw someone so concerned with rules and profits that he'd forgotten what it meant to be human. She thought about the veteran, about the way his hands had trembled as he counted his change, about the dignity in his eyes even when he was clearly struggling. She thought about every other person she'd helped over the years, the single mom who'd been short on cash when her toddler wanted a cookie, the college student who studied for hours and couldn't afford a refill, the elderly woman who came in every Thursday and always seemed to need a little extra on her plate. I'm not going to apologize, Rachel said, her voice stronger now. I'm not sorry for feeding a hungry veteran. I'm not sorry for treating people like human beings instead of just transactions. And if that's a problem for you, then I guess I already know which choice I'm making. She reached behind her back and untied her apron, the same green apron she'd worn for 3 years. Her hands were steady as she folded it carefully and placed it on the nearest table. The cafe was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Rachel, don't be stupid, Kevin said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He seemed surprised that she was actually walking away. You need this job. Where are you going to go? I don't know, Rachel admitted. But I do know I can't work for someone who thinks profit is more important than people. Mrs. Henderson never felt that way. She always said this cafe was supposed to be a place where everyone felt welcome, where community mattered. You've forgotten that. She walked to the back room to get her purse and jacket. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Part of her couldn't believe what she was doing. She had rent due in 2 weeks. She had car insurance to pay. She had bills stacked up on her kitchen counter. But another part of her, a stronger part, knew she was doing the right thing. When she came back out, Kevin was standing behind the counter, looking uncomfortable as the remaining customers stared at him with cold expressions. The mother with the 2 children was gathering her things to leave. The businessman had closed his laptop. Nobody was looking at Kevin with anything resembling respect. Rachel walked toward the door, her vision blurry with unshed tears. Just as she reached for the handle, she heard a commotion behind her. The elderly veteran had come back. He must have been sitting outside on one of the benches. Wait, please wait, he called out, moving as quickly as his old legs would carry him. Miss, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have come in here. I should have just kept walking. Rachel turned to him, and now the tears did fall. This is not your fault, she said firmly. Don't you dare think that. You have every right to walk into any cafe in this country and be treated with respect. You earned that right. The old man pulled out his worn wallet again. Let me pay for the meal. I'll find the money somewhere. Maybe I can do some work around here, clean up something. I can't let you lose your job because of me. Put your money away, Rachel said gently. I didn't lose my job because of you. I lost it because I worked for someone who forgot what really matters. And honestly, I'm okay with that. She gave him a quick hug, something she'd never normally do with a stranger, but somehow it felt right. Then she walked out of Rosie's cafe for what she thought would be the last time. The bell above the door chimed one final time as it closed behind her, and she stepped out into the cool afternoon air. She sat in her car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, letting herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the anger, the uncertainty. But underneath it all was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. She'd stood up for what she believed in, even when it cost her everything. What Rachel didn't know, as she finally started her car and drove away, was that everything that had just happened was only the beginning. She had no idea that one of the customers in that cafe had pulled out their phone during the confrontation. She had no idea that the story of what happened was already being typed up, ready to be shared with the world. Rachel walked across the parking lot with her head down, trying to process what had just happened. Her entire world had shifted in the span of 15 minutes. 3 years of work gone, just like that. She fumbled with her car keys, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. "Excuse me, wait up." She turned to see a woman in her 30s jogging toward her. Rachel recognized her as one of the regular customers, someone who came in every Tuesday and Thursday, always ordered the same thing. "A turkey sandwich with no mayo and a green tea. I'm sorry. I'm not really in the mood to talk right now," Rachel said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know, and I completely understand," the woman said, slightly out of breath. "But I need to tell you something. My name is Linda Chin. I write for the local online newspaper, The Valley Voice. What just happened in there? That was wrong on every level and people need to know about it." Rachel shook her head. "I appreciate that, but I don't want to cause more trouble. I just want to go home and figure out what I'm going to do next." Linda pulled out her phone. "I get it. But here's the thing. Stories like yours matter. You did something kind for a veteran, something that should be celebrated, and you got punished for it. Meanwhile, that guy in there gets to keep his job after humiliating you in front of everyone. That's not right." Before Rachel could respond, she heard another voice. The veteran was making his way across the parking lot, followed by the older couple who had spoken up in the cafe and the businessman with the laptop. They all seemed to have the same idea. "Miss, please don't leave thinking this was your fault," the veteran said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been down on my luck for a while now. But what you did in there, that was the first time in months someone treated me like I mattered. Like I was worth something." The older woman reached out and squeezed Rachel's hand. "My husband and I have been coming to that cafe for 5 years. We watched you work your way up from your first nervous day to becoming the heart of that place. What happened today was disgraceful. I recorded the whole thing," the businessman added, holding up his phone. "I started recording when I realized where this was going. I thought you might need evidence if he tried to twist the story later. But honestly, I think the world needs to see this. They need to see what happens when corporate greed trumps human decency." Rachel felt overwhelmed. These were strangers, people she'd served coffee and sandwiches to, but they were rallying around her like family. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Linda urged gently. "Let me write about this. Let people know what really happened. You might be surprised at how many people care about doing the right thing." Rachel looked at each of their faces. She thought about all the other servers and workers out there who probably faced similar situations, who had to choose between following their conscience and keeping their jobs. Maybe her story could help someone else feel less alone. "Okay," she finally said. "You can write about it," Linda smiled. "Thank you. Can we sit in your car for a few minutes? I just need to get some basic information from you." They sat in Rachel's old Honda and Linda asked her questions. Not just about what happened today, but about her 3 years at the cafe. About the veteran, about why she made the choice she did. Rachel found herself opening up, telling stories she'd almost forgotten. The single mom who came in every Friday, scraping together change for a happy meal for her daughter. The teenager who studied at the corner table for hours, nursing one coffee because it was warmer than his house. The elderly man who came in every morning, not because the coffee was great, but because his wife had passed away and the silence at home was too much to bear. This place? It wasn't just a cafe, Rachel explained. It was a community. At least that's what Mrs. Henderson always wanted it to be. She's the real owner, the one who built this place from nothing. She used to say that a cafe should be where people come not just to eat, but to feel human, to feel seen. The veteran, whose name Rachel learned was Henry, shared his own story. He'd served 2 tours overseas, came back with injuries that never quite healed right, and had been struggling to make ends meet on his disability checks. "Some months are better than others," he said quietly. This month wasn't one of the good ones. Linda typed everything on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. When she was done, she looked up at Rachel. "I'm going to post this tonight. It'll go up on our website and I'll share it on social media. I can't promise anything will come of it, but at the very least, people will know what you did. They'll know you stood up for what was right." That evening, Rachel sat in her small apartment staring at her phone. Linda had sent her the link to the article. The headline read, "Local waitress fired for feeding hungry veteran, when compassion costs everything." Rachel's stomach churned as she read through it. Linda had captured everything perfectly. including quotes from the other witnesses. At the bottom, there was even a grainy photo that the businessman had taken, showing Rachel walking out of the cafe with tears in her eyes. Well, here goes nothing, Rachel muttered to herself, and shared the article on her own social media page. She had maybe 200 friends, mostly people from high school and family members. She didn't expect much to happen. She fell asleep that night worrying about rent, about job applications, about what she was going to do next. When she woke up the next morning and checked her phone, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The article had been shared over 1,000 times. Her phone was flooded with notifications, friend requests from strangers, messages from people she hadn't talked to in years, comments pouring in from all over the state. She scrolled through them, her eyes getting wider with each one. This is what's wrong with America. We treat our veterans like trash. I'm never going to that cafe again. Boycott Rosie's until they make this right. Someone start a fund for this woman. She deserves better. I'm a veteran too, and this breaks my heart. Thank you for standing up for one of us. By midday, the article had been shared 10,000 times. Local news stations had picked it up. Rachel's phone rang constantly with reporters wanting to interview her. She felt like she was in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. She'd never wanted attention. She just wanted to do the right thing. A local news station sent a crew to her apartment. They interviewed her on her small balcony, asking her the same questions Linda had asked. Rachel tried to stay humble, to emphasize that she wasn't a hero. I just did what anyone should do, she kept saying. I saw someone who needed help and I helped them. That's it, but the reporter kept pushing. Do you regret your decision? Would you do it again? Rachel didn't hesitate. I would do it 100 times over. 1,000 times. If standing up for what's right means losing my job, then I didn't want that job anyway. The interview aired that night on the 6 o'clock news. Rachel watched it with her mother, who had driven over as soon as she heard what happened. Her mom cried watching her daughter on TV, proud and heartbroken at the same time. You did good, baby, her mother said, hugging her tight. You did real good. But Rachel couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at her gut. She had $70 in her bank account. Rent was due in 12 days. She'd started filling out job applications online, but who knew how long it would take to find something new? The viral attention was nice, but it didn't pay bills. That night, unable to sleep, Rachel scrolled through the comments on the article again. That's when she saw a new one posted just minutes ago. It was from someone with a military insignia as their profile picture. I'm a Marine stationed 2 hours away. My brothers and I saw your story. We're coming to that cafe tomorrow at noon. We have something to say to that manager and we want you to be there. Please come. This isn't over. Rachel read the message 3 times, her heart pounding. She didn't know what to expect. But something told her that tomorrow was going to change everything once again. Rachel barely slept that night. She kept checking her phone, reading and rereading the message from the Marine. Part of her wondered if it was real or just someone playing a prank. But something in her gut told her it was genuine. At 6 a.m, she finally gave up on sleep and made herself coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she poured. Her phone rang at 8. It was an unknown number with a local area code. Hello? Is this Rachel? The voice was deep, calm, and authoritative. Yes, this is she. My name is Sergeant Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps. I'm the one who left you that message last night. My unit and I saw what happened to you, and we'd like to do something about it. Are you available at noon today? Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. I am, but I don't understand. What are you planning to do? Nothing violent, I promise you that, Jake said, and she could hear a hint of warmth in his voice. We just want to make a statement. We want people to understand that when you disrespect someone for helping a veteran, you disrespect all of us. Henry, the veteran you helped, he's one of our own. We take care of our own. How did you find Henry? Rachel asked. It wasn't hard. Small town, viral news story, distinctive military cap. We reached out to the local VFW and they knew exactly who he was. We've been in contact with him since yesterday evening. He's going to be there too, if you're comfortable with it. Rachel thought about it for only a moment. I'll be there. Good. And Rachel? Thank you. For what you did. For standing up. Not enough people do that anymore. After they hung up, Rachel stared at her phone for a long time. She had no idea what was about to happen, but she knew she had to be there. She texted Linda, the reporter, who immediately said she'd be there with her camera. This was becoming bigger than Rachel had ever imagined. At 11:30, Rachel pulled into the parking lot of Rosie's cafe. Her stomach was in knots. She hadn't been back since she walked out 2 days ago. The lot was more crowded than usual, and she quickly realized why. There were news vans from 3 different stations parked along the street. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, some holding signs that read, "Support our veterans," and "Rachel did nothing wrong." Linda met her at her car. "This is incredible," the reporter said, her eyes wide. "The story has gone completely viral. It's been shared over 50,000 times now. People are driving in from surrounding towns just to see what happens." Rachel felt lightheaded. "I never wanted this to become such a big thing." "I know," Linda said gently, "but sometimes the right thing at the right time just catches fire. Come on, let's get you inside before the cameras spot you." They made their way through the crowd, with people patting Rachel on the back and calling out words of encouragement. Inside the cafe, it was packed. Every booth and table was full, and people were standing along the walls. Rachel spotted Kevin behind the counter, looking absolutely miserable. His face was pale, and he had dark circles under his eyes. When he saw Rachel, he quickly looked away. The older couple who had defended her were there, sitting in their usual corner booth. The businessman was there too, his laptop closed for once. And sitting by the window, wearing a clean shirt and his military cap, was Henry. When he saw Rachel, his weathered face broke into a smile, and he stood up to wave at her. Rachel made her way over to him. "Henry, are you okay? I've been worried about you." "I'm better than okay," he said, his voice stronger than she remembered. "These Marine boys tracked me down, took me shopping for some new clothes, got me a hot meal, and told me I matter. First time in a long while I felt like maybe I do." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. "You've always mattered." At exactly noon, the cafe door opened. 4 Marines walked in, wearing their dress blue uniforms. The entire cafe went silent. These weren't just any Marines. They moved with precision and purpose, their uniforms crisp and perfect, their bearing proud. The lead Marine, a tall man with kind eyes and a strong jaw, was clearly Sergeant Jake Morrison. The Marines walked in formation to the center of the cafe, their shoes clicking in perfect rhythm on the tile floor. Every eye in the place was on them. Outside, the crowd pressed against the windows, phones raised to record everything. The news cameras pushed closer to get better angles. Sergeant Morrison stood at attention and looked around the cafe. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and commanding, but not aggressive. "My name is Sergeant Jake Morrison. These are Marines Carlos Rodriguez, David Chin, and Michael O'Brien. We're here on behalf of a brother veteran, and we're here because of a young woman who understood something that apparently needs to be explained." Kevin emerged from behind the counter, his hands raised slightly. "Look, I don't want any trouble. This is private property and—" "We're not here to cause trouble," Jake interrupted firmly. "We're here to make something very clear. When a veteran walks into an establishment in this country, they should be treated with respect. When someone shows kindness to that veteran, they should be thanked, not fired. Are we clear so far?" The cafe was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Kevin nodded slowly, his face bright red. Jake turned to face the crowd. 3 days ago, Rachel here lost her job because she fed a hungry veteran. She saw a man who'd served his country, a man who was short on cash and long on pride, and she made sure he didn't go hungry. She did it quietly, with dignity, expecting nothing in return. That's called honor. That's called compassion. Those are values we fight for. One of the other Marines, Rodriguez, stepped forward. "We spent yesterday tracking down Henry. We found him living in a weekly motel trying to stretch his disability check to cover rent and food. He told us that he often has to choose between the two. He told us that what Rachel did wasn't just about one meal. It was about being seen, being valued, being treated like a human being." Henry stood up from his seat, tears running down his cheeks. The Marines immediately moved to stand beside him, creating a protective formation around the old veteran. Jake put his hand on Henry's shoulder. "This man served 2 tours in Vietnam," Jake continued. "He earned a Purple Heart. He came home to a country that didn't always appreciate his sacrifice, and he's been fighting ever since. Fighting to survive, fighting to maintain his dignity, fighting to just get by. And when one person showed him simple human kindness, she got punished for it." The 3rd Marine, Chen, spoke up. "We're not here to shame anyone. We're here to remind everyone what this country is supposed to be about. We're supposed to take care of each other. We're supposed to lift each other up, and we're especially supposed to take care of those who sacrificed for us. Jake turned to Kevin, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I understand you were doing your job. I understand you have rules to follow. But sometimes the rules need to take a backseat to basic human decency. You had a chance to celebrate an employee who lived out the values of compassion and service. Instead, you humiliated her. I was just following policy, Kevin said weakly. I didn't mean intent doesn't erase impact, Jake said firmly but not unkindly. You need to understand that. The fourth Marine, O'Brien, stepped forward holding a folder. We represent a veterans organization called Warriors United. After we heard about Henry's situation and Rachel's situation, we made some calls. We've established a fund that will provide meal vouchers to struggling veterans in this area. No one who served this country should have to go hungry. Jake turned to Rachel and his stern expression softened. Rachel, on behalf of Warriors United, and on behalf of every service member who believes in doing the right thing, we want to present you with this. He handed her an envelope. Rachel's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter of commendation from the Veterans Organization, thanking her for her compassion and service to the veteran community. We can't give you your job back, Jake said, but we can make sure you don't suffer for doing what was right. This should help you while you figure out your next steps. Rachel couldn't speak. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, staring at the check. $5,000. That would cover her rent for months. That would give her time to find something better. The cafe erupted in applause. People were standing, clapping, some crying. Even Kevin's eyes looked misty, though whether from shame or something else, Rachel couldn't tell. The news cameras captured every moment. Henry walked over to Rachel and hugged her tight. Thank you, he whispered. You changed my life. You changed mine too, Rachel whispered back. But nobody in that cafe knew that the biggest surprise was still to come. The applause was still echoing through the cafe when the front door opened again. Everyone turned to look, expecting maybe another reporter or curious onlooker. Instead, an elderly woman walked in, moving slowly but with unmistakable purpose. She wore an elegant navy blue dress and carried herself with quiet dignity. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes swept across the crowded cafe with a mixture of surprise and concern. Rachel recognized her immediately. Mrs. Henderson, the real owner of Rosie's Cafe. The room fell silent again. Kevin's face went from red to white in an instant. He stood frozen behind the counter like a deer caught in headlights. Mrs. Henderson, he stammered, I didn't know you were back. Your trip, I thought you weren't coming home until next week. The elderly woman's gaze settled on him, cool and appraising. I wasn't planning to, but then my daughter showed me something on her phone this morning at breakfast. A news article about my cafe, about one of my employees being fired for feeding a hungry veteran. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight that made everyone lean in to listen. She walked further into the cafe and the crowd parted for her like water. Her eyes found Rachel and her expression softened immediately. Rachel, dear. Come here, please. Rachel moved forward on shaky legs, still clutching the envelope from the Marines. Mrs. Henderson took both of Rachel's hands in her own, studying her face with kind eyes that had seen decades of life. Tell me what happened, Mrs. Henderson said gently. I want to hear it from you. So Rachel told her. Everything. About Henry coming in without enough money. About giving him a meal. About Kevin's anger and the public confrontation. About walking out rather than apologizing for doing what felt right. Mrs. Henderson listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her grip on Rachel's hands never loosening. When Rachel finished, Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face Kevin, and though she was a small woman in her 70s, she suddenly seemed 10 feet tall. Kevin, you're my sister's grandson. I gave you a chance here because family matters. I trusted you to uphold the values this cafe was built on. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. My husband and I opened this place 42 years ago. We opened it because we wanted to create a space where people felt welcome, where community meant something, where a cup of coffee and a kind word could make someone's day better. Kevin tried to speak, but Mrs. Henderson held up a hand. My husband was a veteran. Korea. He came home with medals and nightmares. And there were plenty of days when people treated him like he was broken, like he was less than. He never forgot that. Neither did I. We made a promise that any veteran who walked through those doors would be treated like family, not because it was good business, though it was, but because it was the right thing to do. She walked over to the wall where a faded photograph hung. It showed a younger version of Mrs. Henderson and a handsome man in a military uniform, standing in front of the cafe on opening day. That's my William. He passed away 8 years ago, but I've tried to keep his spirit alive in this place. I thought I'd made that clear to everyone who worked here. Mrs. Henderson turned back to Kevin. Instead, I come home to find that my nephew has fired the best employee I've ever had for living out those exact values, for treating a veteran with the dignity and respect he deserved, for putting compassion before profit. Aunt Eleanor, I was trying to run things properly, Kevin said, his voice cracking. The books, the inventory, I was trying to be responsible. Responsible? Mrs. Henderson's voice rose slightly. You think humiliating someone publicly is responsible? You think firing a girl who has shown up on time every day for 3 years, who knows every regular customer by name, who has made this cafe feel like home for hundreds of people, you think that's responsible? She walked behind the counter and opened the register, pulling out the daily receipts. You've been so concerned with pennies that you forgot the pounds. Since you took over 3 weeks ago, our regular customers have dropped by 30%. I've gotten 6 calls from people saying they didn't feel welcome anymore. The Johnson family stopped coming after 15 years. Do you know why? Because you told their 8-year-old son he couldn't have crayons to draw with because they were for paying customers only. He'd already ordered a hot chocolate. Kevin's shoulders slumped. Around the cafe, people nodded, murmuring in agreement. Mrs. Henderson turned to address everyone in the cafe. I want to apologize to all of you. This is not what Rosie's Cafe stands for. This is not the community we've built together. And I promise you, things are going to change immediately. She looked at Kevin with sad eyes. I'm sorry, but I can't have you managing this place. You're fired, effective immediately. I hope you'll learn from this. I hope you'll understand that success isn't just measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives we touch and the kindness we show. Kevin looked like he might argue, but then he just nodded, defeated. He untied his apron and set it on the counter, then walked out of the cafe without another word. Nobody applauded this time. There was just a heavy silence, the kind that comes when something sad but necessary has happened. Mrs. Henderson turned to Rachel. Now, as for you, young lady, I owe you an apology and so much more. You embodied everything this cafe is supposed to be, and you were punished for it. That's on me for not being here, for not making sure the right person was in charge. Mrs. Henderson, you don't have to, Rachel started, but the older woman shook her head. I absolutely do have to. Rachel, I'd like to offer you a position as general manager of Rosie's Cafe. Better pay, better hours, and full authority to run this place the way it should be run. With heart, with compassion, with the understanding that we're not just serving food, we're serving community. Rachel felt dizzy. General manager? Mrs. Henderson, I don't know if I'm qualified. You're more than qualified, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. You understand what matters. That's harder to teach than inventory management or scheduling. Will you accept? Rachel looked around the cafe, at Henry wiping tears from his weathered cheeks, at the Marines standing at attention, proud smiles on their faces, at Linda with her camera documenting everything, at all the regular customers who had supported her. This place had been her second home for 3 years, and now she had a chance to make it even better. Yes, Rachel said, her voice strong and clear. Yes, I accept. The cafe erupted in cheers and applause again, louder than before. Mrs. Henderson hugged Rachel tight, and Rachel felt like she was being hugged by her own grandmother. But Mrs. Henderson wasn't done. She turned to Sergeant Morrison. I understand your organization has created a fund for veterans. I'd like Rosie's Cafe to be a partner in that. Every Wednesday, any veteran can come in and receive a free meal, no questions asked. And I'd like to donate 10% of our profits to Warriors United to help fund your programs. Jake Morrison stepped forward and shook her hand firmly. Ma'am, that would be an honor. Mrs. Henderson then walked over to Henry. Sir, I don't know your full story, but I know you served our country, and you deserve better than counting pennies for a meal. You have a standing invitation to this cafe, breakfast, lunch, or dinner whenever you need it. On the house, always. Henry couldn't hold back his tears anymore. He stood up and saluted Mrs. Henderson with a shaking hand. She returned the salute, her own eyes glistening. Over the next few weeks, Rosie's cafe transformed. Rachel threw herself into her new role, hiring staff who shared her values, creating a welcoming atmosphere and making sure every customer felt valued. She started a program where customers could pay it forward, buying meal tickets that would be given to people in need. The response was overwhelming. Henry became a regular fixture at the cafe, sitting at his favorite booth by the window. Other veterans started coming too, drawn by the reputation of a place that honored their service. The cafe became a gathering spot, a place where people from all walks of life could sit side by side and share a meal. The story of what happened at Rosie's Cafe spread far beyond the local news. It became a reminder that sometimes standing up for what's right comes with a cost, but it's a cost worth paying. It showed that one act of kindness could ripple outward in ways you never imagined, touching lives and changing hearts. Rachel never forgot the lesson she learned through it all. That compassion isn't a weakness, that treating people with dignity isn't optional, that sometimes the smallest gestures, a hot meal, a kind word, a moment of recognition, can mean everything to someone who feels invisible. 6 months later, on a sunny afternoon, Rachel stood outside Rosie's Cafe watching customers come and go. Mrs. Henderson had officially retired and given Rachel full ownership of the cafe, saying she couldn't think of anyone better to carry on the legacy. Henry walked up beside her, moving a bit easier now thanks to some medical care the Veterans Fund had helped him access. "Beautiful day," he said. "It really is," Rachel agreed. "You know," Henry said thoughtfully, "I spent a lot of years feeling forgotten, like I didn't matter anymore, like my service was just ancient history that nobody cared about. Then you gave me a plate of meatloaf and everything changed." Rachel smiled. "I just gave you lunch." "No," Henry said, shaking his head. "You gave me back my dignity. You reminded me that I still matter. And the